24 Committee of the Whole meeting of the Village of Lake Bluff Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Fisher?
Here.
Trustee Rappin?
Here.
Trustee Ryder?
Here.
And trustees Cole, Freed, and Hatch are not here. But you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the non-agenda items and visitor for public comments. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. And I do not believe anybody wants to make a comment tonight. Do we have?
No, sir.
Thank you. Moving on to our general business. The Committee of the Whole will entertain requests from anyone present to modify the order of business to be conducted. We only have 2 items, so I don't believe that might apply. Our first item is item 4A, is the consideration of the minutes from the May 13, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any changes? Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll. To voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on forward to the order of business today, that would be an informational report from the Business Advisory Ad Hoc Committee. And I would like to say that I'm actually very, very happy to see you here tonight. You are an important voice in the village. We have multiple voices advocating for the appearance of a village, for the zoning in the village, and as such, the business community has a full voice, should have a full voice, and now has a full voice to this village. And I'm very anxious and very happy to hear what you have to present tonight. So thank you very much. Paul and Mark, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mark Dewart, 454 Park Lane in Lake Bluff, and I and Paul Lemieux have chaired the Business Advisory Committee for the last year or so, and we've been pleased to do so and represent the interests of the village board. We're here in behalf of our committee, and our committee includes Brad Anderson, Deb Fisher, Lori Lemmy, Gary Lawrence, Jeff Lynch, and Ron Osterline. So I think, if we'll go to the next slide, this funnel is not only symbolic or metaphorical, but really speaks to what this committee has been doing for the last year. We started with the 13 goals and strategy and tactics that had been provided by our predecessing group and the SWOT analysis that had been performed. We combined it with our own member input, and we went through a distillation process. And we ended up with 4 high-level goals and associated strategies and tactics. And I think it's fair to say that what we discovered as we looked through the 13 goals and the foundation work that we had been given, we found a lot more similarities than we did differences. And so consequently, we were able to develop and produce 4 goals that are much more actionable than 13, along with their strategies and tactics. And it's a more manageable number, and it's easier to explain to you, and it's easier to explain to the community. So we'll go to the next slide. I'll do a couple of these goals, and Paul will cover the others. So goal number 1, and at the risk of walking you through here word by word, but I will, the first one is igniting central business district development. And we came up with 3 strategies for this. One is allowing developers to be creative and give us considerations for perhaps a 3-story structure that yet fit in with the overall look and feel of the village. Leveraging the strengths of the CBD and East Lake Bluff, other parts of town, particularly thinking about the west side of town. West side of town meaning really west of the railroad tracks, and between residential and particularly commercial, this is a place where much of the community lives and a lot where the community is spending their money, and where we're getting our retail input and retail benefits for the village. And then third, make it clear to owners and the broader development community that the village is really open for business and supports development and redevelopment. And that's working on that, helping to work on that messaging. So 2 tactics that we had identified. Number 1, work with property owners and stakeholders, obviously working with the village at the same time and village commissions like ABR and PCZBA. And also think about reducing building permit fees and impact fees, trying to reduce the barriers to development and redevelopment in the community. That sends a stronger signal to those folks that we're receptive, we're interested, we're listening, and we're engaged. So that's goal number 1. And
I have a question for
yes,
you, Mark. So number 2, bring the strength of the CBD and East Lake Bluff to other parts of town. What do you mean by that? Do you have specifics?
I think we spend a lot of time and focus on the heart of the community, which tends to be this part of town right here. We put a lot of emphasis on it, rightly so. We put a lot of concern on it, and rightly so. And so what we have the opportunity, should take the opportunity, I think, is to take that energy level and apply it and say, what can we do? And we don't have all the answers, understand, but what can we do to push that energy west and push it past the terraces out to the Waukegan corridor, where we have retail and we have businesses, and we think that there's a great deal of opportunity there. And we've had some discussions and thoughts about, can we remake particularly some of the space in the Waukegan Road corridor? Is there an opportunity to try to change the mix so that we might have additional retail and sales tax dollars, for example? So being open and a little more, taking a more wide-angle view, I think, is what we're talking about.
Yep, no, I would agree with you. The north side of 176, in between Waukegan and 41, is a point of attention. The redevelopment of 41 and 76, the exchange, is a point of attention. We could do better. We could, and the state wants to work on that item. We could do better from a commercial standpoint, from a beautification standpoint. These items are actually in our strategic plan. And so, yes, you're right. We need to put attention on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there is opportunity, as you say, on the north side of 176.
And the business park could gain some attention as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we spent some time talking about the whole notion of what are acceptable uses in the business park. And historically, we've been fairly focused on what those acceptable uses are, taking the opportunity to approve extra special uses as they come along, as opposed to signaling to developers that, let's find a way to reduce the amount of time that it might take to get through all of the review and process and whatnot for different applications, business applications out there. So, any other questions?
Thanks.
Paul?
I'll make it later.
Thank you, Mark.
No, it's all right. I'll save it till later.
Okay, if it's okay, may I take up one point? The first item on the first strategy, talking about the 3-story structures that fit with the overall look and feel of the village. That's one that's going to require a lot of work with the stakeholders, right? That's one that's been a very discussed issue over the years, and even in the formulation of the village's planned mixed-use development tool. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but the idea of that specific strategy is something that would require a lot of work with the community. Just wanted to point that out, and I don't want to miss that, so.
The observation, since you broke it, and the observation I was going to make is that in relatively recent years, we've had some Bluffinia events out at the Park District, out on the golf course or near the golf course. That seems to me kind of bring that downtown vibe a little farther west. And even if we don't do a birthday party next year, we might continue to think of community events that can be, rather than always being on the Village Green, we could continue to use that part of the west part of the city in a little bit more vibrant way.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's kind of maybe not exactly what you were talking about, but a way in which we bring that walkability feeling farther west.
But I mean, Lake Forest experimented with that with their train station car show out on the west side. They try to do things out there, and that development where Sunset Foods is, try to again do the same type
Oh,
of,
is that right?
yeah. Huh. It's hard to do. Honestly, it is.
And ideally somewhere on the north side of 176. I mean, when I think about the strengths of the central business district, it's quaint restaurants and coffee shops and retail. Obviously, if we could extend that quaintness and that energy out west, it would be great. It's probably a tall order, but that would be
Yeah,
great.
it probably is. I'm Paul Lemieux from 560 Evanston Avenue. The other thing is, there's a lot of vibrancy around the Pasquesi business, and it generates good sales tax revenue. So one of our concerns is, as service businesses infiltrate the industrial park, you've got a reduction in sales tax revenue as they displace manufacturing, but is there a way to stimulate retail in there? Is there a way to stimulate manufacturing would be another question, but. Okay, on to goal 2. The other thing that, this was a larger table that we boiled down for simplicity, but we also have behind this measures of success for all of these things. Goal 2, rework zoning to benefit all business districts. And so basically the thought here was that we've got a hodgepodge is probably too harsh a word, but we have a variety of zoning rules that affect businesses, and is there a way to streamline that to make it easier, again, to encourage business to come into town. So the strategies were to rework commercial zoning for all the business districts to see if we could develop a more workable framework. Kind of a trivial example is out in the industrial park, we still have this rule. We let Pasquesi, we made Pasquesi exempt from it, very much to our success, but covered zoning docks are required. That's an owner's requirement. And as you can see, Pasquesi did not do that, but you'd hardly know they had a loading dock there. You've really got to be in the right spot to notice their loading dock. So are there things that we can do to go through and sort of standardize our approach to zoning in those areas in a way that we don't lose the feel that we were trying to accomplish out there, but at the same time make it more hospitable for businesses to come in and make an investment? Strategy 2 is a little bit of overlap from what we've already talked about. Tactics obviously going to be work with property owners and stakeholders and to develop design guidelines to visually connect the business districts. And we did talk about that stretch of 176 on the north side of 176, and we decided that was maybe a larger pill to swallow than we have the capacity for, but obviously that would be a good thing if we could get that done. I don't know. Mark, I think you're up for 3. Are there any questions or comments about this? Okay.
I actually have a question on the first item on the strategy. So how do we differ from other communities in terms of zoning, making it difficult for people to do business? Do you have a comparative study to know how much more difficult are we to other people, or are we basically the same, and in effect would make it much easier for people regardless of?
We have not done that. I think that's an intelligent thing to do. I mean, what we heard, though, was that, you know, we've got a tear down fee that's about $65,000. We've got other fees that make it very difficult to develop. And the consequence of that is that we've got vacant land sitting here. So the idea was, and having been, you know, both Mark and I have served on the finance committee, I chaired it in the early 2000s, and quite frankly, my objective was maximize fees as a way to keep it out of property tax. Mm-hmm. But looking back on it now, maybe that's not the best strategy. Maybe and you know, Brad articulates this well, maybe the idea is to make it up on the back end so that these vacant properties are generating more property tax revenue than they currently are generating. So we forego some of these fees, and quite frankly, some of the fees, I mean, we charge them because we could. It's $65,000 demolition fee. I don't know that the village is out $65,000 because somebody tears something down. You know, it's not like we're asking the village to take on a cost. We are asking the village to forego a revenue stream in favor of a property tax revenue stream down the road. So that was some of the thinking.
And Paul, back on your work on the Downtown Development Committee too, going back with the Waukegan Road Corridor study, you know, one of the things that looked specifically at the Waukegan Road Corridor was the village at that time was much more rigid in its zoning, and the first, one of the primary changes that were recommended and executed was loosening the zoning in the business district to make it more reflective of the downtown in terms of encouraging, to Paul's point, more retail. You know, don't make a business go through a special use permit process, and the time and the money to go through that is counterproductive to the village's goals. So let's make a cleaner, you know, path to get them through that. And so that was done, but could more be done? Yes. I mean, there's some zoning uses in the downtown that, you know, are still, I would say, a little bit too onerous. Like, I mean, is having a yoga facility in the downtown that generates people there, you know, going, buying coffee after, why is that a special use when it's over a certain size? You know, there's certain things that are pretty restrictive still. Yeah. When you look at certain communities, but when you look at others, you know, Lake Forest has historically always been more restrictive than the village, but we can still be better and more business friendly to get more space. Now, the good news is the village did a lot of those things back years ago, and the tenancy is extremely high in the business park. There's a few handful lots that, I think one specifically that's been undeveloped, although it has an approved plan. It's going to be moving the Jaguar dealership down. I mean, that's still in the works, waiting for that when the developer's ready to do it, or the owner. But the village could always do more in this respect, I think, and we did not benchmark ourselves, to your point earlier, but it's probably worth looking at because we probably even learned something from it,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah.
There's one thing also we talked about 4 years ago, that was one of the points of interest from Trustee Markey, and that was creating an hotel on the business park.
Yeah.
And so the question is several-fold on that one. That is, well, I mean, I don't know if it is feasible today, but how much trouble would that be? Is it possibly impossible to do that today, or is zoning preventing us from doing that, or it's just an open possibility to create that today? I mean, it would be you talk about Pascozy, but okay, fine. So we don't even the nearest hotel is in Lake Forest on 60 and 94.
Yeah.
There probably is a possibility for the hospital to have a hospitality right there.
Yeah.
How much trouble would that be?
Yeah, I don't know is the short answer, but I think that's of great interest. And I think now, if a developer were looking at that, there isn't a clear path to get that approved.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is to understand how to position that for a developer, you know, to move forward on that.
And
I think it's a great idea.
And I'm not sure that we're overtly putting ourselves out in seeking developers to do certain things. And, you know, perhaps in playing Monday morning quarterback here, with that opportunity to have gone out and actively talked to developers and saying, we've got a parcel here and it's empty, and we have a vision for fill in the blank. Are you interested? No. Well, you know, go to the next firm or what have you. And I guess it's that receptiveness that when you look through, there's a lot of similarities for the strategies for all this. We actually shaked and baked all this by sorting by strategies and by tactics.
Yep.
And working with property owners and stakeholders and reducing fees. There's a line through here
Yep.
where you see this, you know, repetitively.
So I think I am of a strong mindset that we only fail when we fail to learn from past mistakes. Okay, and so here we have a possibility. So you brought that on the table. We will continue working on that. We'll see what we can do with it. So great, thank you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of opportunities, goal number 3, Stonebridge development. We need to find a way to make it clear that we're open to development, and I think it behooves us to have some idea what development we would be open to. Second is supporting high-quality residential development, as well as redevelopment that targets missing middle housing. And the strategies are going back to talking with and working with property owners, stakeholders, developers, aligning comprehensive land use and zoning code is likely to recur with any kind of Stonebridge development. We're going to be back in that same discussion, I'm sure, and as we would be with addressing the residential development in missing middle, which Paul will talk about in greater detail next. And then we're back to talking about signaling a lot of this by, you know, reducing fees and impact fees. So,
Thank you. Comments on the board?
Maybe just a question for Drew. I mean, have we ever put an RFP out for Stonebridge, and can we do that given that it's owned by Andrew Kite?
We have not, if you're part of the settlement agreement, they put it on the market and had it, a representative, a broker, trying to solicit interest in the site. It's less common for the village to issue an RFP for property they don't own.
Yeah.
It's not completely out of the question, but it's rare, and I would say probably in this particular situation, it would be unusual.
Yeah. Yep. I can think of many reasons why.
Yeah.
I have a thought about that. The Stonebridge question is probably the first question I screen when people say, okay, tell me more about the village, and what about Stonebridge? Mm-hmm. And I think the difficulty is we don't own the land. It is not only a village thing, it's a school thing, it's a road thing, so county and state for traffic and Lake Forest. It is a assessment fee or whatever else, people are hesitant about that. So there's that whole hodgepodge of, okay, this is not only us. No, I don't want to blame other people for no action, right? But it seems to me very intractable some days. And maybe there is the opportunity here to say, okay, what could we do? And basically engage people for consulting for okay, what are our possibilities? Because we are not at a loss, but what would make a difference? To your point here, we need to make it better for people, make it more clear that, and the broader development community, that the village is open for business because we worked out those issues and we have a clearer path. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, the Target development is a great example of that. The village had worked through the Waukegan Road corridor plan, set some parameters about this is what we would accept out there, and then literally right in the lap, here it is, let's go. And that got through the process, soup to nuts, in 6 months, including a sales tax sharing agreement. So to your point, I think the working with property owners and stakeholders, when you talk about reducing impact fees, that's something we have some conversations with our other institutional partners, the school district, the park district, in advance to say, where could you bend without breaking in some of those arenas?
That might be a possibility. Darren, Susan, and Steve, what do you guys think?
I'm wondering if, have we had conversations with Peter Kite lately? I mean, is it possible that he'd be more open to this kind of creative RFP or RFP-like process? Or are we confident that that's a non-starter?
I don't know that he would be interested in doing that with the village.
Yeah, and it sounds like, by the way you say that you are fairly confident he would not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that this process can be done independently of property, and seeing what are all the regulatory and community impacts on the possibility of developing further this land. So for us to say, you might not be able to do X because Y and Z happened, might be, and we're willing to do that to actually make it easier on you, might have an impact on furthering this property. The first question I have is Stonebridge. I'm like,
I'm just happy to see it on your strategies and goals, because I think we, as a board, spent so much time wrestling with the lawsuit that maybe we've had some exhaustion from the topic, and it's important to have new, fresh eyes to reinvigorate the conversation.
Yeah, well, I spent the better part of 2.5 terms wrestling with.
No,
But who's counting?
But I would say that underlying the strategy here is something that we can do as we, in kind of maybe a secondary role, is begin to think about what it is that we would want to have there. What would be acceptable? And let that messaging get into the development community. That might break down a barrier or two for others to know, because everybody, I would guess, knows that Lake Bluff has had a really lousy experience with this. But what would we be, from a positive standpoint, what would we be interested in looking at? And maybe we're lucky and we find somebody and there's a buzz and they take that opportunity to Peter, perhaps.
Yep.
And this is more in your bailiwick than it is mine.
Because I think our situation now is we're saying to the development community, guess what we want?
Yep. I think you're right, because I think there has been an unspoken feeling about the community that is, we're only willing to accept no more than 98 houses. I don't think that message was carried, or whatever the message is. I'm not saying this is 98, but at the end of the day, there's a magic red line that is, nope, not able to do that. And by the way, we don't care about the traffic on Green Bay above a certain traffic. So if we're to set a better expectation, a better global understanding.
There may be notions, watching our time here, but there was a time when a senior citizens development group was very interested in Stonebridge. They kind of got quashed by the ownership out there. But, you know, a sizable senior citizens development has a lot less traffic and has very little impact on schools, things like that. So, you know, I'm not pressing that, and we're getting some wrestling from the development community. But I offer that as a suggestion, as a way to think about something outside the current box, which is kind of what we were talking
And I
about.
think-
And I'm going to let Paul move on here so that we are.
If I may jump in really quick, just one of the things, I think the perfect timing of this report is the timing that's where the Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeals is in the update of the comprehensive land use plan. I think probably the best next step for all of this is to have a joint meeting with the BAC and the PCCBA to share these broad strokes and tactics and share how they can get the alignment and the comp plan in the zoning code, because that's really what all this is about, as Mark said, that, you know, without that alignment, the developers have risk, and that keeps them away.
And I think that my point to Mark, not to you, Paul, when you came here was, there's a lot of great stuff. I'm always worried about, I'm all about, okay, we need to move forward, action items, get progress, get stuff done, better our community. And my first question was, okay, what's next with that? And I think you're absolutely right. Having now a joint, you're not done. There's no way you're done from here.
Good news.
Yes, thank you. So, but we need to discuss what it's going to mean. And I think this is great. It's a great start, literally.
We're anxious for that. Quite honestly, we've put a lot in this, and we know this isn't the end. This is like, is this okay? Can we move on from here? So, yeah. And I think to the Stone Bridge issue, you know, Drew made this comment earlier, I don't want it to get lost, is we kind of teed up what eventually became Target. So I think that's an absolutely proven track record. If we can tee this up correctly and communicate to the development committee what it is, not community, what it is we want out there, and look at our fee structures to be sure that we're not imposing barriers that are not easy to overcome, I think we'll be more successful.
It was an amazing opportunity for two parties who were really, really excited about moving a venture forward. At Target.
Yep.
I think Stonebridge, though, is more difficult.
Yes,
Because
I
it is not a commercial
Yep.
development like
Yep.
Target, where
Yep.
we are pretty much,
Yep.
this is the school.
Yep.
This is the state with roads. This is and the community around trying to work out those roads.
Yep.
This is what do we want as a community?
Yeah.
It's several folds bigger, but I think we can work it out.
Yeah, I agree. Much more complicated. Okay, goal 4. One of the things that we did here, we came up with 4 strategies and 4 goals, 8 strategies, and I think 7 tactics. So you're going to be seeing the repetition of the tactics because they apply across multiple goals. Here it was rework multifamily regulation controls. This is a familiar topic. So rewrite R5 to facilitate new multifamily housing. This was a pretty passionate topic on the committee that we needed to offer some alternatives to single-family housing. I hope I'm preaching to the choir. Work on increasing the diversity and more attainability of housing, and support high-quality residential development, redevelopment by targeting middle housing. And so again, the tactics, you've seen all of these tactics already. Work with property owners and stakeholders, consider reducing building permit fees and impact fees, align comprehensive use plan, which Drew just spoke to, and review and amend zoning codes. So that's.
I have a question about where you are in this process. 'Cause you've boiled down 13 to 4, and it sounds like maybe rearranged some so you didn't throw out 9 of them, but instead work them into a better package, a more easily understood package. Do I understand, though, that the strategies and tactics, I understand we haven't rewritten the R5 multifamily housing, but have we done any work with the property owners, stakeholders, and do you have an idea about, is there a way that the business community can maybe you've always led the charge, but is there, an opportunity there for your committee to work with the property owners as we deal with some of these issues?
Yeah, I think it'd be very good. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if the board is interested in moving this forward, I think that's a conversation that needs to happen, is what is it gonna take to develop this property? What are the impediments to developing the property?
Yeah, yeah. A new strategy might be helpful in terms of under the auspices of this committee meeting with some of those property owners. I'm now talking about the CBD property owners in particular, Block 3, but I'm sure that would be the case elsewhere as well.
The two strategies, the first two, and the tactic, the third bullet, or arrow rather, align the comp land use plan and the zoning code with those two. That's been out of alignment in the village and an identified issue going back to was it the 1970, what was that, Brad? The land use plan of the village in 1979 was like, this is an issue back then. So this is half a century of, let's try to figure this out, and haven't made a lot of progress. And I think having the conversation that we've had over the last 12 months with the missing middle housing, that study has elevated a lot of very interesting statistical information that says we need to do something related to this. And this is an opportunity to maybe tackle these issues now. And I think the work of the Business Advisory Committee will, I think, give some wind to the PCZBA sales to see that through. I think that's helpful to have it from the business community.
I do too.
I didn't know if any of the other members of the BAC would like to say anything, or? I'll just say a couple. Sure.
No, Brad, we cannot have a cemetery, okay?
What's that?
We cannot have a cemetery at Stonebridge.
My name's Brad Anderson. Paul spoke to it, but I think, one of my passions, one of the things that's been frustrating me for now 30 years is the R5 zoning district. In 1994, I bought a house at 16 East North Avenue, put together a development plan for a 2-unit structure in the R5 district, was turned down because there was too much lot coverage with the 2-unit structure. And the reason for that is because our R5 zoning mimics our R4 zoning. So even though it's multifamily, on a 6,250 square foot lot, you can only build the same size structure you would for a single family home. It just doesn't work, doesn't make sense. They turned it down in '94. About 6 years ago, I presented a plan, similar plan for a lot at 15 East Washington. Ed Deegan drew the plans, brought it to an informal presentation to the Plan Commission, and then there was some murmuring from a neighbor against it, and it seemed like it wasn't going to get approved because it required parking exceptions. The neighbor that approved to it is the one that bought the single-family house at 16 North Avenue that couldn't be developed as a duplex, and because now it's a single family, he thinks everything should be a single family. So, rather than just setting lofty goals about changing the guidelines for missing in the middle housing, I think we have to take it a step further and actually change our zoning code to send the signal to the development community, rather than just say, go ahead and spend the money on the development fees and come and see what happens. Same thing with Stonebridge. Stonebridge wasn't approved. If it had been approved, with the market we've been through, I'm confident every home out there would be sold, occupied, and generating tax revenue. It wasn't approved, but there was no signal sent to the development community that anything else could be done. And in fact, the zoning was reverted back to estate zoning, which doesn't accomplish any of the goals that are being set forward with this missing in the middle study. So I think we have to, rather than just say we're open to developers, we have to speak with actions and with changes to our zoning code. Thank you.
Thank you.
Final thoughts? I guess our charge is to sit with PCZBA? Okay.
Are we on the right path here, folks?
Yes,
I think so.
yes.
I think the structure is easy to understand. It boils it down. There's only a little bit of repetition amongst the four, and I imagine if we had 13, there'd be lots of repetition amongst them. So I appreciate that, and I think you're on the right track.
I think you make it painfully clear. I think you make it that you boil down the 13 goals you had to basically 4 or 5 things that are hurting us, how we can improve the community. I think we have use cases such as the hotel use case in the business park, that is what would go wrong if we were to think about that now.
Yeah.
We have so many little things like that. We have possibilities. How can we make it easier? Now, the second thing people say after Stonebridge is, this is great, but you're keeping the character of a village. Okay, and of course, with keeping the way things are, we also are doing a lot of change. Look at downtown.
Yeah.
And so I think these are challenging for us, but I think this is great, so thank you.
I think, thank you for summarizing this, because I think you've taken a lot of the thoughts that have been around for the past 10 years. I mean, none of this is earth-shattering, right? This has kind of been around, but it is a summary of things that we've talked about, and really more than anything, it's a call to action with authority that I think this board is giving you as different leaders to take this to the PCZBA and to include us as needed as a voice to say, it's time to take action and make this happen. So I appreciate you guys giving this the oomph.
Couldn't say it better. That's really how I feel. That, these are goals that we've loosely addressed throughout so many different areas, but to have this committee there to be boots on the ground is exciting to me. So thank you for the hard work.
We'd appreciate some, we haven't prioritized these 4, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's something, Regis, that some additional conversation by this body would be helpful. As we shake and bake this with PCZBA, they may have different sets of priorities, but I think it would be helpful to try to build consensus. If we're going to dig in and do something, it would be helpful to know that we're digging in as to what leadership in the community wants us to focus on first or second, for example.
Yes, I think we have so many exciting opportunities, I should say, because it's going to require work. I think this is chapter 1. A lot more is coming. I think that we are going to choose what is most exciting first. You're right, I think.
Do you want me to poll the board? I can poll you all.
I was going to say, I think I would need some time to think about it, but I don't feel comfortable speaking off the cuff right now,
No,
but,
and that's fine.
but I
That's
think
fine with
that's,
me.
yeah, I would think that'd probably be a good idea, Drew.
Yeah, I think it's fair for you to ask the board to come back sometime in the near future with our thoughts on a prioritization here. I mean, we want to do it all, but it doesn't hurt to prioritize.
And we can, Paul mentioned that we've got a lot of back study material. I mean, we've sorted by strategy, by tactic, we've got
These members will have time to.
Measures of success.
measures of
Watch the video
success
later.
Yeah.
for each of these, for each of these items. And so, that, we wanted to at least give you the 100-foot look before we kind of got down in the weeds with a lot of this, and satisfy you that we were on the right track here.
The short conversation I had with Drew says, and I really appreciate that, is let's send that to the PCZBA, get their thoughts, and bring it back to this board and see what's happening next. And we'll have our thoughts for prioritization and for fleshed out thoughts to actually go forward. We cannot stop that. This is good.
One request I do have, and maybe it goes to the PCZBA first, but I think it would be very helpful to look for regulatory structures that work if ours is viewed as onerous, is there one in the North Shore area? I know we don't have a lot of towns our size, but is there one that works? Is there something, a model we can look at where, you know, developers are anxious to get involved because they seem to be, you know, easier to you know, fulfill the process, go through the process?
Look at Highwood compared to 5 years ago.
Yep.
Do you think the regulatory structure helped that? Is that what you're saying, Brad? Pardon?
He said
He said absolutely.
Absolutely. I see.
I mean,
Built in Highwood has improved Highwood, it's improved property values in Highwood, throughout Highwood, and the buildings that were put up in Highwood, both rental and condominium buildings, would never be allowed later. But they seem to fit well within the community.
and maybe I can ask Paul and Mark, I mean, was it your hope that this group would say, yeah, right track, we kind of bless going to the PCZBA, and then you go to the PCZBA, or do you really feel like if this group is aligned, that having kind of the heft of this board with the PCZBA would be a better option than getting ping-ponged around? You guys have been around a long time doing this stuff. What's the best plan for you?
I want to go back to the question you asked earlier before you
Okay,
answer that,
sure.
if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm thinking about like the Highwood example, and I'm thinking of other issues here. I mean, I think regulatory hurdles in Lake Bluff, I think certainly the R5, that's a given, for sure. Others we can polish, when I think of like the Waukegan Road corridor. I think Lake Bluff's biggest issue is getting its comp plan and its zoning code to align. And some of that is figuring out really what we want to see, like on the Stonebridge site, or on Block 3, or on Block 1. Is getting those two, it's not so, and the tools will fulfill that. We'll figure that out. You know, it's, if the village's vision is set, then we can staff and the attorneys can tell you how to get there really easy. It's just, what do you want to see there? How big? How many? And we can.
And I think the messaging
Yeah.
from the strategic plan is critical with that too, along with those other two facets. So.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, it's, to go to the PCZBA and say we really want to do this without giving a little bit more clear direction on what we want to see,
Yeah.
is hard.
I'd lastly like to kind of go back to the first page and the opportunity to share who these folks are who are on the committee and the hard work that they've put in this. And as we did that shake and bake and distillation process, it was a really super opportunity for us to work together. And we couldn't have done it without everybody's pulling in the right direction. So thank you to these folks. Thank you for blessing our group.
I think it is,
Thanks for sending us in, Coach.
I don't know if you should thank me on that one, but I think it's important. I think it is hearing a different voice than, okay, we should put that zoning, without having the counterpart say, okay, how can we use that zoning? That is important. It is, I've heard through this board for the last 6 years and being inside this board and outside this board, it would be great if we could do that. This is our prime opportunity. So I do not want this to stay, okay, it was a nice presentation. Okay, it really is, I really take this as a first chapter that is not finished, by the way. And so we need to move forward with that to say, can you develop that thing? Can you sell that thing there? Does that make sense? Okay, we have the right people in the room. It's us to make it happen. Okay, again, we only fail if we don't learn from our mistakes. So I want this to work. We have Stonebridge, we have Block 3, we have that piece of land there, we have that piece of land there along 176. How can we do something great with that? Okay, it's up to us, people. So thank you.
Thanks, Coach.
What property are you speaking about on 176? The property that's not village-owned on the north side?
The south side, the village 10 acres between Jawa and the West Terrace.
I thought someone said north side.
I think it's probably Block 1, the north side of Block 1.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Guys.
Thank you.